Hello, everyone. I'm Richard Sher, and it's time to square off tensions throughout the Middle East. Could there be a much wider war? This week's panel, we welcome Professor Rick Vatz, Republican National Committee woman Nicolee Ambrose, and attorneys Tonya Bana and Billy Murphy, who is one of our Square Off original panelists. Well, throughout Baltimore, almost everyone in the Jewish community knows someone living in Israel. A lot of people in Baltimore's large Jewish community. So many babies, women, men, children have been murdered or taken hostage. When Hamas attacked on Saturday, October 7th, Israel was quick to retaliate, a heavy loss of life on both sides. The death toll just under 5,000 right now, the largest number of Jewish people killed since the Holocaust. More than 200 hostages taken by the Hamas terrorists. President Biden flies to Israel, meets with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, assuring him that the United States is steadfast in its support of Israel. Rick Vatz, kick us off today.
Well, on October 7th, a day that FDR would have said will live in infamy, the terrorist group Hamas, with the assistance of Iran in a Pearl Harbor type of operation, attacked Israel by rocket and land, killing over 1,500 Israelis and injuring countless others. They included in their attacks raping, murdering innocent citizens, burning babies, and they killed children in front of their parents. They killed parents in front of their children, and the Middle East will never be the same.
Jump in, Bill. Thanks, Rick.
Well, this is an atrocious attack, barbaric in terms of today's values and even yesterday's values, and unprecedented in Israel. And so I fully support the Jewish people in their right to retaliate appropriately and end that threat. What I'm afraid of, though, is that in a world where everyone's looking for an excuse to be anti-Semitic, that if Israel violates the laws of war and does it the BB way, this is going to be out of control and we'll be threatening World War III if there's not a proportionate response. My only criticism is of Bibi. I think he's a horrible leader. I think he was asleep at the switch. He should have known that this was going to happen. And he is responsible for why Israel was unprepared. And I think what Hamas did was take advantage of the distraction from self-defense that was caused by this uproar over Bibi trying to pack the courts so he won't be convicted of a crime. A very selfish act, a very selfish position with all the extremists in Israel. And as a result of that, he is going to do things that are good for him, he thinks, but bad for Israel. And he's got to go. He's got to go. He is not an adequate wartime leader. And it's time. He is well past his expiration date. He's an extremist himself, and he's got to go. And we have to have a two-state solution.
Nicolee Ambrose, good to have you back. What's up? What do you think?
Always great to be with you, Richard and team. It's just tragic what happened in Israel on October 7th. And it's disgusting that in many cases, U.S. taxpayer dollars have funded Hamas and at this point funded the Iranian regime. Tyranny senses weakness, and the U.S. has not been strong enough nor strong enough ally when we're funding terrorist groups, period. So Israel did the right thing to declare war. War is violent, brutal, and messy, but that's why it's called war, and that's why we try to make sure we avoid it at all costs. And I fully support the Israeli state in their effort to get back their hostages and fight this war. They have to do it. But what really concerns me is all of this seems very scripted and scripted by Iran. And if you look at the timeline of different funding mechanisms by the United States to both Palestinian Authority to Iran over this various timeline. It seems like everything is scripted and we're falling right into their response. So I sincerely hope we can get out of the Biden administration not in World War III. And I pray that these hostages, which include many Americans, can somehow safely be recovered to their homes.
Very nice. Tonya Bana.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything that Nicolee said. Tyrants only respect strength. And unfortunately, one of the byproducts of that reality is that there are a lot of casualties before things return to any semblance of normalcy. I obviously my heart goes out to all of our friends and loved ones in the Jewish community. My heart breaks for any innocent person who's been impacted by this escalation, and I just hope that our world leaders can negotiate some kind of de-escalation, because a lot of innocent people are going to die.
In his primetime address to the nation, President Biden said he is asking Congress to approve $100 billion to help both Israel and Ukraine to defend themselves, asking Americans to understand that, in his words, if the pure, unadulterated evil of Hamas and the attempt by Russian President Putin to erase Ukraine's independence prevailed, terrorism emanating from the Middle East would threaten all Americans. Who wants to jump in?
I think he's right. I think he's absolutely right. And we've got to be concerned about not just making sure that Israel is safe, not just responding proportionately to what happened, but making sure that nothing happens that sparks or justifies a wider war that can become international. That's my biggest fear out of this, in addition to my empathy and sympathy for the Jewish people who have been mercilessly murdered and tortured and kidnapped, and you name it. It's just awful what's happening over there. But this can get a lot worse. And I think that we need to be concerned about that.
Go ahead, Rick.
I agree with Billy. I think this has all the potential of expanding. President Biden did mention Iran in his speech. We don't know if he's given an explicit warning to Iran. Some of this stuff happens behind the scenes, and we have to hope that he's been stronger behind the scenes. He's not a great orator. There's no way to correct that. He's not a Ronald Reagan. He's not a John F. Kennedy. But he made his points clear. There are some people that object to his conflating the situation in Ukraine with the situation in Israel. But I understand why he's doing this, and I don't have any major objection, as long as there is strength behind the scenes where Iran is well aware that if Hezbollah gets involved, maybe the United States troops will get involved.
Well, go ahead, Nicolee.
So if I could address two of those points. One, for Biden's speech, it almost appeared as though he pulled pages from two different speeches and jumbled them up in giving that speech. I understand that before October 7th, they were working on Biden giving a Ukraine speech. And so they just, instead of starting over from scratch and saying, okay, we need to get a funding package through, they just did not approach that incredibly important Oval Office address the way they needed to. I almost thought it came across as disrespectful to Israel and the Israeli victims, the way he almost focused more on Ukraine than on Israel, given current events. All that said, going to Professor Vatz's point, it is incredibly important, of course, that the United States is a good ally and that we support our allies. But the biggest concern is because we've shown such weakness that, once again, those tyrants sense that. And Iran has been running circles around them around us while we continue to give them money. And the ultimate sign of disrespect is, even though the Israeli hospital bombing situation was worked out and proven that that came from within Gaza, we still had Middle Eastern leaders who refused to meet with the president of the United States. How do you negotiate when people will not meet with our president? So I'm very concerned that world wars have been caused by far lesser problems than what has just happened in the past few weeks in the Middle East. So I am terrified because our United States president cannot get respect on the international stage that this is going to devolve more rapidly than any bad situation we have seen.
I'm sorry this is devolving into a discussion of the standard Republican talking points, and that you're using this tragic
Come
event.
on, Billy.
Let me finish. Let me finish. Let me
Middle
finish.
East leaders would
Let
not
me
meet with the
finish.
president of the United
Let me
States.
finish. Let me finish.
All right, no
Let me
personal,
finish.
no personal.
This is a time where you got to put aside those tropes, and you've got to look more analytically at Joe Biden. And you got to be a lot more fair than you've been. Joe Biden did something that was unprecedented. He united Europe. That's hardly weak leadership. He's not only united Europe, he's broadened the base and the strength of NATO. That's hardly weak leadership. He has armed Ukraine and been steadfast in his support. That's hardly weak leadership. And what he has been doing in Israel is absolutely appropriate. He's being a strong leader, and he's attempting to keep the Middle East in less than a powder keg situation.
All right,
And
Bill.
he needs your support. He does not need your criticism.
All right. Okay, Tonya, jump in here, please.
Yeah, on a related but different point, what's concerning to me is the very significant likelihood of an uptick in hate crimes in the United States, directed
Absolutely.
at both the Muslim communities and the Jewish community. And I just strongly urge people to support your neighbors, protect your coworkers. It's disturbing how fragile our hold on civility is, and how little it takes for us to, devolve into tribalism. And people are going to get hurt here as well. And people should be very vocal about, prophylactically about the need to look out for that and to resist it.
Rick, we'll get to you in a second. Nicolee, before we go to the break, do you have anything you want to say in response to what Billy said? And then we can move on and stick to topic. You want to say anything, Nick?
I don't think it is a partisan attack to highlight when other countries' leaders refuse to meet with the president of the United States. That is a problem. We have to confront problems head on, because if that is the situation and we don't want to end up in World War III, we have to, as Professor Vatz said, really hope there's much better diplomacy going on behind the scenes than we're seeing in the public-facing view.
I think you ought to assume that. And of course, Republicans need to step up too, because you've shown a great deal of leadership, especially in electing the Speaker of the House and making sure that the country's business is being taken care of. So lots of luck.
Well, Billy, if you'd like to discuss Democrats behaving badly, why don't you talk to Omar and Tlaib, who are publicly bashing the Democrat president of the United States and calling basically on very hateful language against our Jewish population. And furthermore, as congressional representatives absolutely spreading falsehoods on a daily basis and destabilizing our culture here, not only in the US, but giving fodder to terrorists around the world.
All right, guys, stop.
But
Everyone-
we're looking forward to some Republican leadership. on
Billy,
that.
hold
I
on.
don't think we have to look too far.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to stop for a moment. We're not going to do any more of that stuff because we have so much to talk about of substance. Here's the voice of Sher, Howard Mallison, to thank our 4 sponsors for letting us do this program at length. Howard.
Thank you, Richard. Pappas Restaurants and Sports Bars with 4 area locations and a menu second to none. Treat your family to a Pappas Fab Cake. And leading edge auto body and mechanical repair for collision repair or general service, they work on all makes and models, 410-433-6433, or visit them at 5807 Falls Road in Mount Washington. And our good friend, attorney Barry Glazer, who will help you get the revenge and compensation to which you're entitled. Give Barry a call at 410-547-8568. And Double T Diners from Route 40 West to Annapolis and everywhere in between. Double T Diners, totally terrific for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Back to you, Richard.
Okay, Howard, thank you. Well, the deadly blast at the Arab hospital reportedly killed almost 500 men, women, and many children. Hamas blames Israel. Israel says it has proof that a barrage of rockets was fired by Islamic Jihad terrorists in Gaza, passing in close proximity to the hospital that was hit. Tonya Bana, then Rick. Oh, Rick, I promised you. Go ahead, Rick.
Let me just say, first of all, before I get into that, in defense of Joe Biden's speech, he did reiterate our support for a two-state solution. He denounced both anti-Semitism and anti-Islamic prejudice. So I think those were important parts of that speech that he said. With respect to the LLI hospital, I think the proof is just overwhelming now that it was done by Palestinian Islamic Jihad. It was not done by the Israelis. But the fact is, as you know, the old expression that a lie goes around the world before the truth gets addressed in the morning. But I'm just saying that truth is the first casualty in all of war, and it is impossible to convince people, for example, who simply hate Jews and hate Israel, of the truth of this hospital bombing, which was now pretty obvious that it was done because of the radio. You can tell from the radio messages of Hamas discussing this. You can tell by independent intelligence agencies. There's no doubt. But the fact there's no doubt does not stop people from believing myths that they want to believe because they're anti-Israel and anti-Semitic.
Well, I want to add, again, online hate. Hate online is surging since the Hamas attack on Israel. Groups that study hate speech say it has spiked not just for Jewish communities, but also for Palestinians. And both groups agree that the social media companies are still not doing nearly enough, to rid their platforms of hate against targeted groups. Speak up.
One of the reasons that I will never buy a Tesla is because anti-Semitic hate speech is rampant on X, which used to be called Facebook. And Elon Musk is on another planet because he has not only shown himself to be anti-Black, but he's also shown himself to be anti-Semitic. And we've got to do something about that because he has tremendous reach and tremendous power. And so I think a boycott of Tesla is in order these days because we got to stop this anti-Semitism from him.
Billy, X was Twitter, not Facebook.
Yeah, Twitter.
Yeah.
I think you all knew what I was talking about.
We all know, everybody knew.
So, Richard, I actually previously served as spokesperson for the Coalition to Stop Genocide in Burma, right, which created the world's largest refugee camp of 1.4 million people. Essentially, for those who don't know, the Burmese army went in, wiped out Rakhine State, and it was an entirely Muslim population which was forced to flee to Bangladesh and create this 1.4 million person refugee camp. And there were horrible situations of babies being chopped to pieces, just a horrific genocide of an entire people. And during that, the benefit Israelis have is that, it's first world country, very active social media platforms, access to media, but very similar acts of, absolute brutality. But the difference was whatever was put on social media was pretty much all propaganda from this Burmese military. And the social media companies allowed those stories to just propagate all over the place with no control. They didn't have policies to catch it. In this case, Facebook was the biggest offender. And then if you tried to publish stories talking about what actually happened, you were blocked, versus the Burmese military being able to entirely create their own narrative of the situation. So social media companies clearly have a long ways to go. And the answer is that, automation does not work for everything, especially when you're talking about genocide and human brutality. And it is something that technology has really failed at across the board.
I agree with you 100%. And what I find astonishing in the news, in addition to all of this, is that India regularly and illegally shuts off social media access to places where it does not want people to know what its policies are and how they are implementing those policies violently and unfairly. And so we have to watch out for that kind of behavior as well, that a sovereign nation can arbitrarily just cut people off from the internet is shocking, and I think other nations may follow. The other thing that I'm worried about is that this will become an international laboratory for war weapon experimentation in Israel. Every time a conflict breaks out, people bring out their most deadly new weapons and use them just to see how well they have been designed and work rather than appropriately. And I hope that that doesn't happen. But it's happened in every war that I can remember. And so I have no reason to think it won't happen now. So this is going to get worse before it gets better, everybody. And we've got to pray. We've got to pray for the people of Israel. We've got to pray for the Palestinian people who are apolitical and not a part of Hamas. We've got to pray for our enemies too, because hopefully they will see the righteousness of a better path rather than the barbarity of what they're doing now.
We also have to, in addition to praying, we have to give money to like the ADL and organizations that are going to be in a very concrete way doing things to combat the fallout from this. Because, again, I am shocked. I'm just stunned, quite frankly, by the degree of anti-Semitism and how little it takes for that to flare up. I've always lived in communities that were very diverse. Baltimore has such a robust, large Jewish community. It's just something that is normal and everywhere. And so to see that how prevalent this behavior is just really, it's really sad. It's really disturbing. Again, I just hope that people will view this as a warning to not ignore acts of bigotry and xenophobia, when you see casual acts of bigotry and xenophobia, when you see them in your workplace or in your neighborhood or in your community association meeting, because those views, those attitudes, they are there and they flare up and sometimes result in violence.
Let me just say that Tom Lehrer, the humorist, to bring a little humor into this, I suppose, the humorist of the 60s and 70s, used to say, with all of the combinations and permutations of fighting in the world and disliking in the world, the one thing that unites people is everybody hates the Jews.
Why is that? Why is there so much anti-Semitism and so much hate in general in this country?
Well, may I just go on, add to what Tonya said? And I have children. One's in college, one's in high school, and it's really scary and disturbing what I'm hearing back from what they're hearing at their various school communities, where, certainly when I was in college, or I'd say 10, 15 years ago, if someone said something anti-Semitic, they would be blasted. They wouldn't be allowed in polite company. And now with what I'm hearing that my kids are seeing at school, what's being allowed to be common practice is, half and half. Half of the people are pro-Hamas terrorist group, half the people are pro-Israeli. We've got a major problem. And I don't know if it's certain Middle Eastern countries' funding of initiatives here in the United States to try to change the narrative or what have you, but we actually need to spend effort getting to the bottom of it, because it's terrifying if literally half of our young people think Hamas is a nice, pleasant organization, and that there's a counter, and that it's acceptable in any stretch of the imagination for Hamas to have done what they did to the Israeli people.
I wonder what major political leader has unleashed all of this hate, and he who shall not be mentioned isn't given his fair share of the blame for why hate of all kinds in America has accelerated dramatically, because it's being encouraged by him. And
Okay,
that's
Billy.
a problem. No, I'm
No,
sorry.
let's go back
Hold
3
it,
years.
hold
Any
it,
one of us would
hold
prefer
it,
the
hold
landscape
it,
of
hold it.
America
I
in the
didn't
world
interrupt
3
you.
years ago.
Look, you're the only one interrupting here today. I didn't interrupt you, and you have a right to respond to me. So, as I was saying, it would be a horror show beyond belief if this man were to become the next president of the United States. Can you imagine him managing something this complicated, managing, having the right touch to talk with the people involved, and not going out on something that gratifies his ego instead of helps the world?
Hey, Billy. Wait, Tonya, you're next after
Yeah. I
Nicolee.
think. I'm sorry.
Nicolee, brief, respond to him.
I say that we have a problem in the United States with pro-terrorist sympathies expanding, and you respond to me attacking the former president of the United States. Long story short, any one of us would prefer the world landscape 3 years ago, where there was no potential breakout of World War III on the horizon, where we had just planted our US embassy in Jerusalem, where there was safety and security, and where Iran was contained.
All right,
The
Nicolee.
only president to
Are you
contain Iran.
serious?
Stop it,
Don't
Billy.
interrupt.
Demonstrably true.
Hold it. Go ahead, Tonya, and we're running short on time.
Yeah, unless you look like me, Nicolee. I mean, as someone who is ambiguously beige and is mistaken for Hispanic and being Arab, it was terrifying to be a brown woman in America when Donald Trump was in office. And I am not a fearful person, but I have. I experienced, when President Trump was in office, more acts of aggression from random white men on the street who would invade my personal space without masks on, do things that were clearly designed to be provocative, things that I've never experienced before. I've had people call me racial slurs, anonymous people contact me on social media and call me racial slurs. Those things never happened before Donald Trump. And what I will say is it is very disturbing to me that you're saying that the sentiments in our higher institutions of learning is evenly divided, because to me that's the equivalent of Trump saying there's good people on both sides. It wasn't true then, and it's not true now. We should be able to come together and agree that certain things we can all condemn as unacceptable.
Okay. Let me conclude, and then I'll talk to you guys. You should know that U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland has directed the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's offices to work with state and local law enforcement and urging federal prosecutors to be in contact with faith and community leaders. So be vigilant in what we do here in this country. We're going to just run a little longer, give each of you 30 seconds for your final comments on the war in the Middle East. Nothing about Trump, nothing about any of that. And let's start with Rick Vatz. 30 seconds, Rick, I'll cut you off.
Well, let me just say that this is the worst world situation I have seen in my lifetime, and that includes the Cuban Missile Crisis. I think it's very dangerous. I think it's dangerous for Jewish people. I think the acceptance of Hamas by a large minority of people is just absolutely despicable. I think anybody who supports Hamas against Israel is a person actually who has no principles, who has no ethics, and is absolutely at odds with the values of the United States.
Nicolee Ambrose.
I am Thank you, Richard. I am praying for American strength and resolve to support our allies, since that's the only thing we have control over. Prayers for the Israeli people, once again, for the safe return of their loved ones, for our Americans who are also kept hostage. I hope that there are cooler heads within the Gaza Strip in Palestine. I hope that we can somehow miraculously have folks who respect humanity emerge as leaders of Palestinians instead of the absolute disaster we're seeing with a terrorist-led aggressor right now.
Thank you, Tonya Bana.
Yeah, I just want to encourage everyone to be kind to people. There are so many people who are carrying around so much hurt and so much worry and so much concern, and you never know what people are going through. And we've lost kind of basic kindness to other people, basic humanity towards other people. And this situation and the risk of escalation is a good reminder that we need to do better.
And let's conclude with Billy Murphy. Billy?
I love the Jewish people, and I don't want to see them come to harm, and I want this war to be over fast, but I want it to be done in accordance with the rules of war, and I hope that we help Israel prevail against Hamas. And after that is done, we need to work on a two-state solution rather than holding the Palestinian people hostage to the legitimate fears that both sides have of mutual annihilation. This is a problem that has been difficult to solve over many presidents. And we hope that this is an opportunity to solve these regional problems, which have spiraled out of control into barbaric conduct by Hamas. I don't want Israel to do the same thing. There's no eye for an eye or tooth for tooth here that would be appropriate, because that would make both people blind and toothless and stupid. So let's handle this at the highest level of humanity and not let anger and hate be the order of the day.
Very good show, ladies and gentlemen. You guys were terrific. Thank you, Billy, Tonya. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Nicolee. And I also want to take a moment to thank our 4 sponsors for giving up some of their time so we could have more time for this. Pappas Restaurants and Sports Bars, Attorney Barry Glazer, Leading Edge Auto Body Mechanic, and the Double T Diners. And we will see you next time when, once again, we square off. Be safe. Bye-bye.